Well, hello, wonderful worldview people. It's a wonderful day to be listening to a wonderful podcast, and this is it. You found it. Good job. It's the Connection Pointe Worldview Podcast. It's a podcast designed to help you as a parent or guardian go deeper into places your student has already gone. And I'm here as always with Dr. Zach Brightenbach. Hello, Zach.
Hello.
And Pastor Trey Shigley. Hello, Trey.
Hello, sir.
This is kind of a cool special series on covering material you guys just ran our middle schoolers through during what is called Worldview Week. It's over their fall break, and a whole bunch of students decided to go to learn more about ethics on this particular week and deepen their understanding there. And then in addition, then you guys go have fun in the evenings and afternoons and whatnot. But man, I'm just blown away by our students and what they're just really hungry to dive into, and blessed to see what you guys are feeding them, basically. So why don't you give us the goal of this entire week, and what did you aim to do with this first particular lesson?
Yeah, the goal of this series is really to get students to think about ethics, which I think a lot of them probably have never had an ethics course, and they've never really formally thought about it. Right. I mean, we all deal with moral situations constantly, all the time, every day.
Yep.
So it's not like they've never thought about ethics, and they've read their Bible, hopefully, somewhat, and so they've read some of God's teachings on it. But we wanted them to really think through what is morality and what are some of the theories about ethics that humans have come up with, and kind of look at what's good about them, what's not as good about some of those theories. And then a big takeaway I wanted them to have is, why is what the Bible says about ethics more complete than what humans have come up with their different ethical theories? How does it capture all the best aspects of these man-made theories and avoid some of the problems or the incomplete parts of those theories? So that was part of it. And then part of it, too, is just giving them different moral situations and giving them a process to use to think through a moral situation. Because a lot of them probably just wing it, right? They're in a moral situation. They just decide what to do. They might give a little thought to it, but they've never really realized, there should be sort of a process I use to think through, especially my really big moral questions and what I should do. So we wanted to get them thinking about that. So this first lesson we're doing today is really just going to be introducing students to ethics and why we should care about it. And then we're going to start getting into some of the theories, and then ultimately the whole thing comes together with what does the Bible say about ethics and putting that into practice.
That's huge. I literally point to one group of middle schoolers in the country that's having this conversation.
Yeah,
right
there's not very many.
So that's pretty special. So maybe just help us right off the top here, define ethics or morality, Dr. Zach.
Yeah, we didn't really distinguish between those two words. It's can treat them as sort of synonyms, ethics and morality. But what it basically refers to is just figuring out how we ought to live, right? So science, for example, is about how things are, right? Okay, you drop this thing, it falls down, and there's this thing, gravity. Let's understand what gravity is and why it does what it does. But it's studying what is the case.
Okay.
But ethics is not about studying what is the case. It's about studying what ought to be the case. How should we live?
Cool.
What is the proper way to live? Whether we live that way or not, what are the oughts, right? How should we do it? So you want to study what's good and bad, right? So sort of moral values has to do with what's good and bad, like loving your children, probably good. Starving them, not feeding them, probably bad.
Yep.
That kind of thing. You can say that those are good and bad. And studying right and wrong, which is a different concept than good and bad. Because something could be good, but it's not necessarily your duty to do it, right? Like it might be great to be a medical missionary to Africa. That's a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's my duty that I have to do that in life. So we talk about moral duties as well as moral values, what's good and bad, but also what's right and wrong, what's your duty that you're responsible for. And we also talk about virtues, right? Character. What kind of person should you be? Not just what should you do or not do, what's good and bad, what's your duty, but also like what kind of person should you be on the inside, what kind of character traits should you have. So there's a lot of different when you study ethics, which is a branch of philosophy, there's a lot of different areas within ethics, but we really focused in our week on the ethical theories, at least some of the major ones, a few of the major ones, and then just applied ethics, which just means you're applying your ethical thinking to specific kind of moral situations or issues that come up.
Interesting. So this is a lot of terminology that we take for granted. I think we think about a lot, use a lot, have to interact and live out a lot, but I don't think that we really have a full understanding. It's kind of subconscious, but probably needs to be pulled to the surface and thought through. So, Trey, next you discuss the difference between ethics and law.
Yeah.
People often confuse the two because they both deal with questions of right and wrong, set rules for behavior. So tell us why they're not the same.
Yeah, I do think it's easy to confuse them, because if ethics is just what you ought to do, well, isn't that just the laws that we have in society? But no, laws are just kind of a society's legal standard of behavior. Mm-hmm. What a society has decided, hey, this is what you can do or can't do. But they are not the same as ethics, because laws can actually be immoral or unethical. Mm-hmm. Just a few examples right off the bat we can think of are things like ownership of slaves. That was legal and allowed for most of world history in most societies, but that's not ethical. Things like Jim Crow laws in America until the 1960s. Or things like it was legal to take away property and kill Jews in Nazi Germany. And even more recently, it in a lot of places is still legal to have an abortion. Mm-hmm. And those things are legally okay to do, but they're not morally okay to do. So ethics and law are two different things. And so there are situations where it will be morally correct to break the law. Mm-hmm. When you think that a law is conflicting with morality. In fact, the earliest disciples did this. Mm-hmm. They were kind of breaking the laws, and that's why they're getting thrown into jail or persecuted. But because they did that because they felt like the laws were unjust or wrong or preventing them from teaching people about Jesus. MLK Jr. peacefully broke an unjust law and went to jail for it. And he quoted Acts, what the disciples said in Acts 5:29. We must obey God rather than men. And so there is this ethical framework, this morality that kind of supersedes and is more important than the rules and laws that a certain society might make at a certain time in history.
So it is. It's almost similar to what you said about science. Science just kind of says what is, but ethics says what ought to be. Yeah. Law is, it might just be what is the law, but it may not be what ought to be the law. Mm-hmm. You still got to weigh in on a moral level. So, Dr. Zach, you guys discussed the difference between ethics and etiquette or manners. Tell us about that difference.
Yeah, I think just like there's a difference with ethics and law, there is a difference with ethics and manners or etiquette. Etiquette is just the proper behavior in a certain culture, like don't burp at the dinner table, right? Now in America and in a lot of Western countries, it's just considered bad taste, bad form, bad manners, bad etiquette if you burp while you're eating dinner with somebody. But there are cultures where that's not the case, right. and burping at the dinner table is actually considered polite. For example, parts of China, Turkey, India, parts of the Middle East, these burping at the dinner table is good because it shows that you like the food.
Yeah. Right.
So these are very cultural, but ethics goes beyond culture. It's if there is a moral law, it's not going to be the sort of thing where in this part of the world, murder is wrong, but in another part of the world, it's okay. Ethics seems to transcend culture, right? What we perceive ethics to be, and we'll talk more about that here soon. But we don't see ethics as being the sort of thing that's cultural or at least if you try to claim that ethics is up to each individual or culture, it breaks down, and we'll talk about that as we go. But I would say that even though etiquette is not the same as ethics, if you intentionally violate etiquette or just intentionally choose bad manners in your culture, there's a moral component to that, right? You're being disrespectful to the people around you. And so the moral problem with that is just disrespect, right? But the mere fact that burping can be okay in one culture and not okay in another, it just shows that it's not the same thing as ethics.
That makes sense. So you go on to address this particular question, which, Trey, I would love for you to help explain what you said about this. Here was the question. Do we discover the laws of ethics, like finding treasure marked on a map, or do we make up moral laws for ourselves?
Yeah, that's a huge foundational question when it comes to ethics, because it will determine whether you go towards God to learn about your ethics, or whether we're trying to find the philosopher that's correct about their own set of ideas and philosophy. And so ethics is not something that we kind of make up on our own, or it's something we all, get the smartest people in the room and they talk and they figure out what's right or wrong.
Because again, that could change season to season, country to country,
absolutely,
era to era.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so morality comes from God. And so people didn't create, we could use the example of like gravity. People didn't be like, what would be cool if it was a thing? Like if gravity was a thing. No, it's like people discovered gravity and sought to understand it.
Yeah.
It wasn't dependent on people's ideas
even though it was
about
already there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And same thing with morality. People can study it and can learn about it, but it's existing outside of whatever people think of it. And Jesus says that God is the source of morality. And it's not even like God is the one who makes the decisions on what is right or wrong. God himself is what is good and right and holy. And so morality is kind of the natural output of who God is. And Jesus says no one is good except God alone. And so only God can be the source of true morality. Like what you said, Ron, like anyone else is has some evil in them and can be wrong. He's the perfect standard of goodness. He's kind of like the yardstick that everything else is measured against. And we also know that ethics aren't something that we like make up for ourselves, because we get angry when other people break the moral law. We say things like, hey, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
We aren't like, well, they must think that's okay, so that's okay.
Right.
No, we actually apply morality. We think it should be applied across the board. Even if we say it's dependent, we still get angry when people break it. So we don't see morality as a personal preference. And we also make moral comparisons. Most of us would probably agree, like, oh, someone like Hitler was more evil than my grandma. Well, we're making moral judgments and comparisons there, and we're saying that there's this standard that Hitler fell further short of than your grandma did.
Yeah.
And so if we are making comparisons between evil, then we are admitting, at least subconsciously, that there is a real moral standard that everyone's getting measured up against.
Interesting. Well, Zach, after that, you emphasized there are a lot of aspects to morality. It's not just about our actions. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, that's something we're going to see as we go through this series, that a lot of times people think ethics is just about rules, about do's and don'ts and behaviors with your actions. And that is important, right? Certain actions are right. And we're going to see the Bible teaches that when we get to biblical ethics. There's certain things that are right, certain things that are just plain wrong, that it's your duty to avoid it. There's a lot of actions that are neither right or wrong. They're kind of optional. Like, should I eat the Cheerios or Wheaties this morning? It probably doesn't have a lot of moral significance which one I choose. Should I wear a red shirt or a blue shirt or some other shirt? So actions can be kind of morally neutral. They can be right or wrong. But we shouldn't think that ethics is limited to actions and a list of do's and don'ts. There's a lot more depth to that. And not every ethical theory that we're going to see is going to really capture all of these. But what we're going to see, what we're building up to, is to see how biblical ethics does capture all of these. So that's a teaser for where we're headed. But another factor besides actions would be something like consequences. Which choice is going to have the best results? I think that's something that we should care about, that consequences matter when you're making a moral decision. It's not the only thing that matters. And sometimes we can go astray by just emphasizing consequences too much.
Yeah.
And we don't think about whether the action itself is good, even if it produces a good consequence. We don't want to go there, but we shouldn't ignore consequences. That seems like something that really matters. Character is critical. It's not just about what you do, but it's about who you are. Virtues, we're going to see the Bible has a lot to say about that, and certain ethical theories emphasize character, but we want to be the right kind of person, a person who's honest, kind, patient, courageous, has these kind of virtues. We shouldn't ignore that in ethics. Your motive matters in ethics, right? You can imagine shoving somebody to the ground. I asked the middle schoolers, is there ever a way that shoving somebody on the ground could ever be a good thing?
Yeah.
And some of them are like, no, that's always going to be bad. And I can see why you would think that, because usually your motive is not good when you shove someone on the ground.
Right.
But you can imagine shoving someone out of the way of an oncoming truck or something.
Right. Yeah.
And you shoved them to the ground, same action, but you weren't teasing them, you weren't messing with them, you were trying to save their life. That was a different motive. So your motive, I think, why you do things has to be taken into account in ethics, and not just what you do. So we're gonna see a lot of these things as we go. There's a lot of breadth and depth to ethics. It's not just about do's and don'ts.
Well, for this opening lesson, you spent some time helping students see then why it's important to think about and study ethics. Maybe sum up just a few reasons that this is such an important topic.
Yeah, well, it really does apply to all areas of our life. We're constantly being bombarded with choices that we have to make.
Yeah.
Some we make almost subconsciously, and others we make more consciously. But from everything from school to friendships to family relationships to sports to work, almost everywhere you go, you have moral decisions that you're making. And so ethics applies to all areas of your life. And it's not just like it's there in the background, but it affects your relationships. It affects your ability to get a job. It affects how good you are at your job or the quality of your family life. So it's not just that it's present, but it's also affecting really strongly everything. And ethics is at the heart of all relationships. Every relationship you have depends on ethics. Every relationship depends on love, on trust, on honesty, on kindness, loyalty. These are all moral issues and moral values. And when we act immorally, we damage the relationships in our life, including our relationship with God as well. And when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? He talked about, well, love the Lord your God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. He's talking about morality and how we treat God and how we treat others is so, so key. And ethics really is, it's how you approach ethics and how you treat the people around you is going to make a longer lasting impact on the world than almost anything else you could do. Most people couldn't list, who the richest person in the world was 20, 25 years ago. But, for the parents listening, you could probably name a lot of people 20, 25 years ago that made a big impact on your life. And so that is just showing like how we treat other people and how we go through life is going to matter a lot more in the long run than what kind of grade we got on an English test back in high school, or even if we were valedictorian or we won the state championship in something. Like all of that just fades and goes away, but the relationships that we have will really stay, and those are centered around ethics.
That's huge. Dr. Zach, question for you, like, can ethics be learned? Some people assume you're either by nature a good person or a bad person, and you can't really learn ethics.
Yeah.
So in this lesson with the students. What did you say about that?
Yeah, I think it can be learned, which is why we thought it was useful to have a whole worldview week on ethics.
I hope it can be learned.
I hope so. I mean,
we spent a lot of time trying to teach it.
Yeah. So I think there is a nature and a nurture component to it, right? Like I think some of us struggle, especially with certain sins, more than others, right?
Yep,
Some
for
people
sure.
are violent people; they just
Right.
have an anger
Yep.
in them, and just by nature, it's really hard for them to let go of that, or
Yep.
not to be violent, or not to be angry. So I think there's a nature component to ethics, and some of us have further to go than others. Some of us are just naturally more loving and kind and all the rest than other people. But I think we all can get better, every single one of us, and I think there's a nurture part to it as well, which means what you're taught, what you learn in your lifetime. And so I think it's valuable to study ethics. I think what we're doing in this series is useful, just thinking through a process of how do you make moral decisions, and really trying to not just wing it as you go. We can all get better. And so I think that we're going to see that as we go, that there's a lot of value in studying these topics.
That's awesome. So as we wrap up, we like to give a question that you might want to discuss with your student about this particular lesson. So Trey, what's a good question that parents could discuss this time?
Yep. What is ethics, and do you think it's valuable to learn about it?
Awesome.
That would just start a good conversation.
I think you're right. Well, thank you guys for doing this for the students, because this is such a gift. This might be one of those seeds that's planted now that maybe you don't quite see all of the fruit of for a few years or many years, but super important to get students thinking this way, much less embracing this and living this way. Please know we're praying for you and your students. If you need something, please let us know. If you go to connectionpointe.org, that's point with an E, connectionpointe.org, and then click on the Worldview tab. You can connect with us that way. God bless you guys.